The Dallas Cowboys suffered another ugly home loss to the Lions.
Saturday's win proved Dan Lanning's critics wrong.
For the second time in 3 seasons, the Texas Longhorns have dominated, embarrassed the Oklahoma Sooners.
Baltimore Ravens extend their winning streak to 4.
The Tigers pull off the stunning upset in overtime.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Dallas Cowboys suffered another ugly home loss to the Lions.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast.
Where do the Cowboys go from here? Because this one, of all their losses this year, this one felt the worst.
Hopefully up is where they go from here.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, look, I mean, I think we all anticipated a very tough game for the Cowboys. I think we spoke all week about the kind of uphill climb that the defense was going to have due to all the injuries. And I think you and I specifically went out of our way to point out the fact that we felt like the offense needed to step up and, play complementary football to help this defense out because it was going to be overmatched. The fates of the injury gods have made it so at this point, right? So you really needed to have your offense step in here and take, shield the defense from, the blunt force of what the Detroit offensive line was going to unleash upon them, right? And you didn't get that at all. And I think the fact that you didn't get that at all again, and just another situation in which you needed your offense to start early. You needed your offense to get points on the board, and it couldn't do either. The fact that they couldn't even finish this game with a single touchdown when you needed points to win the game. I think it's more than just this game that this kind of points to. It does point to a larger issue of just an inability to put points on the board, an inability to kind of consistently move the ball when you need to, an inability to play an aggressive brand of football when your defense is depleted and you really don't have another kind of path to victory in this game. It points to just a failure on the coaching level, a failure on the player performance level. I can look at what happened on defense and kind of excuse at least tonight's game. I think if you're looking big picture, maybe not for the whole season of how they've played, but tonight's offensive performance feels kind of like a further sinking of confidence in this offensive coaching staff specifically, and just an inability to do what it takes with really no excuse, playing at home with a mostly healthy team. To be able to either move the ball consistently to help your defense out, just not even excusing putting points on the board, but an inability to put points on the board even when you get into the red zone. I think if you're asking for where does this team go from here, they have to make serious changes to right the ship on offense and to get some more consistency on defense. I think you're looking at a spot where even the question that we had going into the season of can this team advance? Can this team take the next step? I'm not even sure that this team can get to where they were last year. I mean, so I think that, it's time. I think a lot of people are talking about looking in the mirror. I think it's time for everyone to take a hard look in the mirror of what this team is right now.
Yeah, so we're 6 games through. The Cowboys still have 11 more this season. A lot can change. When you get Micah Parsons back and Deron Bland, who knows what this team is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
But I watched a lot of football today, Landon, and I don't want to overreact to one game because the Cowboys are clearly better than the team that they showed today. I don't think they're a playoff team. I think when you look at their roster, you look at their playing style, you look at some of the other teams in the NFC, I don't know if they're a playoff team. Now, I know the NFC East is going to have to take one, right? And maybe it's Washington, maybe it is Dallas, maybe it's Philadelphia. I just don't think they're one of the top 7 teams in the NFC right now.
I think what it is to me is that I do think that this team is going to get better. Like that's still not. I mean, honestly, this isn't far off from the mark that we set of where we wanted to be going into the bye. We talked about wanting to be 500 going into the bye, right? And so they're there. They did that, but I think what this has done is really shown us a ceiling to where this team can be.
Yeah, this is not a Super Bowl caliber team.
Yeah, this is to me. This doesn't look like a team, or at least this year's version has not shown us anything so far that makes me think that this is, a Super Bowl caliber team. I don't think we're hoping that this team, this caliber team, could even make the playoffs. I think they have. It'd be one thing if you have to kind of just solve a couple things on one side of the ball, but there are pretty major glaring issues on both sides of the ball now that don't just include injury. So I think that they have a lot of things to fix, and a bye week is nice. It could be a reset, but it isn't going to solve all your woes.
No,
they've got a lot of things that are fundamentally problematic. Maybe you could trade some things with a trade, or make some changes, but even some of the things that people have been prescribing, firing the coach or moving on from all that kind of stuff, that's not a prescription for trying to win this season.
No.
So I think this team has just really got to figure out exactly if this team is even in striking distance to make this worthy, or if it's time to maybe make a change kind of near the top at the coach and just get yourself in a position to start fresh next season. Because, I do think there is a chance to turn this around, but we got to get on the other side of the bye and start seeing something. And if we don't, I think it's time to start making preparations for the fact that you're not a playoff team, and that this season is kind of a lost season.
So there's no doubt the Cowboys have more injuries now than they've had really at any point over the last 3 years, right? The Cowboys have been relatively healthy during the 21 to 23 stretch. They're banged up now, but they also just lack talent compared to those teams. Not necessarily high end talent, Landon, but feels like they're missing 4 to 5 quality players as backups. They're missing the Dorrance Armstrong types, the guys that can just come in, give you quality play at multiple different positions. And it shows in games like this because, they were getting blown off the ball on defense. They had guys missing tackles. Their safeties were taking bad angles. On offense, you don't have a running back. You don't have a guy that can create separation. Your tight end has regressed. It just feels like this team is nowhere near as talented as the last 3 iterations of it.
Well, look, not to pull this too far back, but just look at what the Cowboys had walk out the door last year. Maybe it wasn't a ton of super high end talent, but that draft class where they got a ton of different players all throughout it. And for them to kind of have a lot of these players, the sort of middle class of this defense and certain part of this offense to kind of walk out, and they've been trying to refill it with younger players. And I think the issue is then some of those players have taken a little bit longer to kind of develop. There's been injuries to some of those younger players. And I think when you, especially at the defensive end position, which is such a key position, it's you can only kind of patch that up for so long.
Yeah.
But it takes kind of a monumental effort to do so. And I think that you required a kind of superhuman performance from your offense to win this game. This is a good football team, very good football team.
Yeah.
And they came in here with a chip on their shoulder about the way things happened last year. And if you're going to go against all of that kind of, force that's flying in the face of your victory, right? You have to, the best parts of your team, the parts of your team that can play winning football, that has to be, which is your offense right now, because that's the only part that isn't physically beat up. They have to kind of pick up the slack and find a way to overcome. And your defense has done that for you at different points this year. Your offense has to be the one to do that every once in a while. And it just felt like, even after last week where you saw Dak and this offense kind of bring this team back and find a way to score points at the end of the game, they never were able to kind of fully get in sync. Frankly, the best part of this offense may have been those early drives at the very beginning of the game. And then the early part of when Cooper Rush came in, frankly. So,
however, They got a lot of penalties, right? Now, most of them were deserved, right? Their first play of the game was also a pass that could have been intercepted that got knocked up in the air that Rico
Yeah.
Dowdle ran for like 30 yards. Like, they were moving the ball, but man, it took a lot of mistakes
true.
from Detroit's side of things just to get him down there.
That's true. I mean, especially on that first drive, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, and look, I mean, it's not like they ended up perfect either. I mean, Dak ended up throwing an interception. They ended up kicking a field goal in the first drive. So look, I mean, like they at least they were getting across the 50, because I'm pretty sure that after their first 3 drives until the second half, they didn't get the ball across the 50-yard line on like 4 consecutive drives. So yeah, it just started to really deteriorate, from not good. It started at not good and then got worse from there as the first half went on.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can take aim at Monday Night Football with that $5 bet if you want to. The AFC East lead is up for grabs with the Bills and Jets facing off. Although Aaron Rodgers is at home, he is not favored. FanDuel has the Bills as 2.5-point favorites. Defense also expected to rule the day with the total set at 40.5. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you canvas analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Saturday's win proved Dan Lanning's critics wrong.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks.
The outside noise about Dan Lanning was that, well, he hasn't won a big game yet. What games he won? Well, that goes to the wayside when you beat Ryan Day. And Ryan Day's got some critics out there, but I think most people really understand Ryan Day's a really good football coach. And Lanning is in year 3. Ryan Day, not in year 3, much more experience. And yes, Mario Cristobal left the cupboards pretty well stocked, but most of this roster, not all of it, but just about the entire roster, Dan Lanning's guys, whether via the portal or via the high school ranks. And this roster in particular had myself and others excited about what Oregon can do this year. And they showed what their full potential is, and that is they can play with anyone. Because if you looked at the national discussion going into this game and going into this season, whether you think it's fair or not, the case can be made and has been made by many out there in the sports commentary world that Ohio State has the better roster than Oregon and has the best roster in all of college football. Okay, well, if you're going to make that case and Oregon just went on the same field and beat them head to head, then the national title hopes, that special season that Oregon fans have long been waiting for, can absolutely happen this year. And coming into this season, I talked repeatedly on this show and often would hear from Duck fans about the national championship landscape. And I said, yeah, I think Oregon can win the national championship. I predicted them to go 12-0 in the regular season. Haven't wavered off of that prediction. I picked them to win every game so far this year. Haven't been great against the spread. Finally got that first, score prediction to be correct against the spread last week, but helped that Oregon was an underdog, of course, at home. But all that hype I often heard from Oregon fans. I don't like getting hyped. I don't like getting excited because then it sets the stage for a massive letdown. Yup, it absolutely does. Would you rather not have the ability to play at that level? Because Oregon just played at a national championship level, and they didn't even play their best brand of football. One of the reasons I continue to be high, and look, there are a lot of reasons to be high on Oregon's win against Ohio State, highest ranked matchup in Autzen history, probably the biggest national win to ever take place at Autzen. Plenty of Oregon fans still might say 2018 Washington. That's an interesting debate. What was the bigger inflection point for Oregon football? I know that 2018 led to the reintroduction of Oregon into the national landscape after they had fallen out of it for a couple of seasons. I don't know what the ramifications post this particular game are going to be. Oregon got a 2026 commitment, which is great. They could get more players to commit, but what's the rest of the season going to play? Well, I know what I think, but I don't know what I don't know yet because, of course, the games haven't played themselves out. But fans that get worried about the hype coming into the year, I don't know if Oregon's worth it. I don't know if it's this. That game should crystallize for you, oh, okay, Oregon can play with anybody. There's nobody in the country that I think on a neutral field, home field, wherever, blows Oregon out. They can beat Oregon. Plenty of teams could beat Oregon because there are a lot of really good ones out there. But if you can go toe-to-toe with Ohio State the way that Oregon did, I don't think there's a roster in the country that is decisively better than Oregon to where they could go on the field for 4 quarters and Oregon wouldn't have a chance to win the football game. And you combine the high school recruits Lanning has brought in and developed. You bring in, you factor in veteran returners like Terrence Ferguson and Jeffrey Bossa and Marcus Harper as well. You factor in key transfers, and I thought the roster was ready. And the question was, are they going to be able to execute in crucial moments? And is Dan Lanning going to take a step forward as a head coach? Well, the answer so far has been yes. The Idaho game feels like a distant memory, doesn't it? That's the same team. It's mostly the same exact guys that got pushed by Idaho on the same field. Well, Dylan Gabriel had a good but subtle comment in his post-game presser. He was asked about, there were external questions, but some internal ones as well. After the Idaho game, he said, mostly external. Now, that could be just good media training from a veteran quarterback who knows what to say in that moment, or maybe inside that locker room, they weren't as concerned as a lot of people outside the program were. Understandably so. Understandably so that there were people that weren't at practice every day, that weren't in the locker room before, during, and after the game who said, hey, you struggle with Idaho. What the heck's going on here? Well, same team goes on the same field a few weeks later, and credit Dan Lanning and coaching staff for having the team ready, and they were ready to go from the jump. Had an interception on the opening drive, got taken away, no review. All right, well, guess what? They got a lot of veteran leadership in there. They didn't dwell on it. They went to the next play. They made plays when they needed to. Defense wasn't perfect, but the defense made plays when it was called upon, including the final stop at the end of the game. And I've got individual shout-outs coming up on today's show later on as well. We're jam-packed, absolutely positively jam-packed. But if you don't like getting invested in a team because, well, they could let you down, yep, this team could absolutely do that. Lots of teams can do that. Last year's team kind of did that. But would you rather not have that hype at all? Dan Lanning just showed, not just Oregon fans, but everybody else, we are a conference and national title contender right here, right now. That's what he said to everyone else without saying it. Let the play do the talking. But the talent on this roster, when it plays to its full potential, that's what it looks like. There were sloppy moments. Oregon won that game, missing a field goal, mishandling an extra point, going for 2 when maybe they shouldn't have, though if the play had been blocked correctly, it should have been there. They had 4-on-4 and just didn't block the play correctly for Kenyon Sadiq to run it in for 2. And then there was the whole review ordeal, and there was that, and Oregon still found a way to win the football game. That's not every mistake that Oregon made. I didn't mention the 4th and goal, in which Tez Johnson was wide open. Dylan Gabriel makes a bad read. You know what? That's a much more common football play than missing an extra point. But Oregon was sloppy at times, still found a way to win. And Ohio State wasn't perfect either. I'm not saying that was the best game. Ohio State played their A-plus game. Both teams played well, though. But both teams played well. It was hard to run the football going both directions. Both defensive lines showed up in that front. And there were moments where they broke through, but go look at the rushing numbers, not blowing anybody away. Jordan James was great, was not having a CJ Verdell-like game. Oregon didn't go for 270 on the ground as they did back in 2021. Like, it was a great battle, quite frankly. That's what it was. Sometimes Ohio State won the battle, sometimes Oregon won the battle. And that's what you expect from 2 great teams. 7 lead changes in the second half. A lot of even things in the box scores. Both quarterbacks play very well. Both receiving cores played exceptional over the weekend. That's what two good football teams going at it looks like. And sometimes it comes down to who executes better in the crucial moments. And last year, Oregon didn't have it against Washington. This year, they had it against Ohio State on Saturday. Will they have it the next time they get pushed in that spot? We're going to find out. I don't know how many teams, if Oregon plays to that level, can push them down to the wire. The answer is not very many, but they could see that Ohio State team again. And Dan Lanning has got this team in a position to have a special season. Can't guarantee it's going to happen. Great teams have not won the national championship before. Go ask Georgia from a season ago. That was a really, really good team. Didn't even get to play for the national championship because we didn't have an expanded playoff at the time. But now we do, and Oregon's in a great spot to get themselves in the 12-team playoff, and I thought they would before the year. They're going to be able to make a swing at it. Transfers are the right guys. Recruits are all over the roster. Returners, coaching staff, it's all there. It's all there. So if you wanted a shot, an opportunity to have a national championship caliber season, Oregon just showed you, yeah, they're capable of playing at that sort of level.
For the second time in 3 seasons, the Texas Longhorns have dominated, embarrassed the Oklahoma Sooners.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We all knew that this would be the outcome. This was always going to be the outcome. That when we reached the second Saturday in October, when the Texas Longhorns and the Oklahoma Sooners lined up against each other, the Texas Longhorns were going to dominate Oklahoma, just like they did in 2022 and just like they did today. Because the Texas Longhorns right now are a way better program than the Oklahoma Sooners. And the Texas Longhorns football team right now is a way better football team than the Oklahoma Sooners. And all week, Sooner fans were telling me that they won 11 out of the last 15. I guess it's 11 out of the last 16 now. And they've dominated this rivalry. And at some point, Texas was just going to Texas. And Oklahoma was going to find a way to win. They were talking about Sooner magic, right? They just had this belief, this thought, this bravado, whatever it was, that Oklahoma was just going to come in here, beat up, battered, but still find a way to win, because that's what Oklahoma does in Dallas. That's what Oklahoma does in the Cotton Bowl. That's what Oklahoma does in this rivalry. They just win. At what point does logic take over? Because Texas fans, smart football fans, always knew that this would be the outcome. At kickoff, it was a 17-point spread. Vegas was trying to tell Sooner fans that Texas is 2 touchdowns or more better than this Oklahoma Sooners team. And all I heard all week was, why is Texas so confident? Sooner magic. We've won 11 out of the last 15. The Sooners are going to find a way. And Texas fans haven't just been telling Sooner fans over the last couple of weeks that this was going to be the outcome. We told them in the offseason. Because the biggest question was, are the Texas Longhorns SEC ready? And are the Oklahoma Sooners SEC ready? And I think the answer to that first question was a resounding yes. And I think the answer to the second question, were the Oklahoma Sooners SEC ready? Hell no. And we told them that in the offseason. But yet they continued to tell us that the Sooners were slept on. They continued to tell us that the Sooners were, had a chance to win the SEC. It was insane. But we told them, smart football fans who understand how it works, that you could not come into the SEC with a quarterback making his second career start, the first game this year, completely replacing your offensive line, and come into this conference and dominate or be as good as they thought they would be or have been in the Big 12. While meanwhile, Texas was returning 4 of their 5 starters on the offensive line, returning a quarterback in his 3rd year, and had 2 deep, 3 deep elite talent at almost every position. But somehow Sooner fans came into the season thinking they would be one of the best teams in the country. And they came into this game today thinking they had a chance against the Texas Longhorns. At this point right now, the Texas Longhorns and the Oklahoma Sooners are not on the same level. one program is headed in one direction, the right direction, a championship direction, the Oklahoma Sooners at best are stagnant. Right now, the Texas Longhorns are a championship football team. The Oklahoma Sooners, they'll be lucky to go 7-5 this year. But we told them all of this in the offseason. But now after watching them lose to Tennessee, after barely beating Auburn, after Auburn gave that game away, and now after being held to 3 points in the Cotton Bowl for the second time in 3 years, not being able to even score a touchdown against the Texas Longhorns, hopefully Sooner fans will realize now that everything over the last 15 years didn't matter. And right now and moving forward, this Texas football team is just different than what Oklahoma can put on the field. And don't let the Sooner fans gaslight you, right? Because like I said, at some point, logic has to take over. Coming into this weekend, all we heard was it's Red River. Anything can happen. Throw out the roster. Throw out the rankings. Crazy things happen in the Cotton Bowl. I mean, yeah, I guess, if both teams are good. But at some point, logic has to take over. Oklahoma was never going to beat this Texas team. What does Oklahoma do well? Seriously, let's think about it. Based on what you saw today, what does Oklahoma do well offensively? Block, catch, run, throw. What does Oklahoma do well? And then the defense that we kept hearing all week, the defense, they were going to force turnovers. They were going to make Quinn uncomfortable. The defense, Brent Venables' defense, they were going to give Texas a hard time. To me, it looked like Quinn Ewers, Trey Wisner, Steve Sarkisian. It looked like they did whatever they wanted to on offense today. What do the Oklahoma Sooners do well? What can the Oklahoma Sooners hang their hat on? The defense played well at times. They may have kept the Texas offense in check at times. But it doesn't matter when you have one of the worst offenses in the country and your defense is constantly on the field. And the Sooner fans all week that still predicted Oklahoma to win this game, that said that even with their injuries and all of that, Oklahoma would still find a way to win this game. Now they're going to pivot and they're going to try to gaslight you. And they're going to say, oh, Texas fans are celebrating beating this Oklahoma team. And Texas can only beat Oklahoma when we have a bunch of injuries and we're not fielding a competitive team. Whose fault is that? Sounds like Brent Venables' fault to me, right? I mean, last time I checked, Brent Venables has the same 24-hour Steve Sarkisian does, right? Why is your team a complete shell of themselves anytime they have a major injury? That's for Oklahoma to answer, right? But if they want to talk about losing their top 5 wide receivers, I mean, Isaiah Bond really didn't do anything in this game. He left with a hamstring injury in the first half. Did that affect Texas? Not really. But based on what we saw from Michael Hawkins today, did it look like they mattered? Did it look like it would matter if he had his top 5 wide receivers? Because he wasn't really doing a good job of throwing the ball or hitting them. The fact is, and what Oklahoma Sooner fans need to face, is that the past is the past. As glorious as it was for Oklahoma, especially in this game and the Red River rivalry, the past is the past. And these games moving forward will look a lot like they did today because Texas is just on a completely different level than the Oklahoma Sooners right now, today and for the foreseeable future.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can take aim at Monday Night Football with that $5 bet if you want to. The AFC East lead is up for grabs with the Bills and Jets facing off. Although Aaron Rodgers is at home, he is not favored. FanDuel has the Bills as 2.5-point favorites. Defense also expected to rule the day with the total set at 40.5. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you canvas analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast.
Pretty good week of NFL football, Croc. Niners win, obviously. They get the week started with a win over the rival Seahawks, now own a piece of first place in the NFC West, tied with the Hawks, now 3-3, have that first game win for that tiebreaker too, if it comes down to that in the NFC West. And then you look at the rest of the West, the Rams didn't play this week, Croc. The Cardinals got whooped. The Seahawks got whooped by the 49ers. The Cowboys got whooped bigger than anybody in the entire league, maybe all season long. Raiders, like anybody, 49ers fans are rooting to lose. I think lost pretty big this week. So Niners fans got to be feeling good right now as we head into Sunday night and then the primetime Monday nighters.
There's not a whole lot that makes me happier or more happier than a 49er win than watching the Dallas Cowboys loss and watching the way that they lost. I'm out having a nice little dinner date with the wife, got my eyes on the TV a little bit, paying attention to what she's saying, but I'm multitasking here. And all I keep seeing is touchdown Lions, interception in the end zone, Dak Prescott, Montgomery throwing guys around. Like, the Lions are good. They are a legit team. They can win in a physical battle. They can I don't even want to say finesse you, but we saw against Seahawks how Jared Goff didn't throw an incompletion all game. Like, this is a legit team, a team that, I thought maybe, like, were they peaking in the NFC Championship game? They weren't. Seems like they came back this year and they're even better than they were last season.
The Cowboys, I think the Lions are good and the Cowboys are bad. I think we're seeing both of those things right now. An appearance from Cooper Rush in this game, which is usually not a good sign. Didn't get to see Trey Lance, though, for the Cowboys. It wasn't that bad for them to go to their third quarterback. But the Cowboys can't stop the run.
They cannot. You see what the Baltimore Ravens did to them. And here's the thing about the Cowboys. The weird thing with them, they can look like that. I don't think, I want to say, was it last week when they played the New York Giants or when they played on Thursday Night Football? I didn't see this great football team, but they're this kind of weird team that from week to week, they can kind of look like they're clicking. And right now, a team that has 3 losses, you can look up at the end of the year and it not feel like they're a great team, but they're like 13-4. They are a very weird team. Then they get into the playoffs and they perform more like what we saw today than maybe in a victory that we'll see them get later this season. So I don't know what to make of the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know what to make of Dak Prescott. Sometimes he looks like a $60 million quarterback, and then sometimes he just flat out doesn't, like he did today. A very weird team, and the 49ers get to see them in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and looking at teams that you have to obviously play against and might have seeding against, might see in the playoffs, the Dallas Cowboys are one that I'm just not worried about at all right now. And they're 3-3, just like the 49ers are, but a very different 3-3. Cowboys have gotten torched multiple times this season, have big holes. The 49ers gave away a couple games. They could very easily be 5-1 right now. And there's a 75 point differential between these two teams. So the Cowboys on the season are minus 42 points. The Niners are plus 32, even though both these teams are 3-3. So built very different at 3-3 teams right now, in my opinion, are the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. The scary moment, though, a bummer of a moment. And yeah, I mentioned it here in the chat, Niner Cowboy, the Hutchinson injury, carted off the field. And from what I understand, this is like a season ender, potentially like next season could be impacted by this, and their best player on defense, Aiden Hutchinson. So that is a massive loss for the Detroit Lions. It's a leg injury. We'll find out exactly what this is, but that's a bummer. You never want to see something like a really severe injury like that to a star player in the NFL, even if it's someone that you're gonna have to be going up against later in the year.
Yeah, and Hutchinson, I feel like, even since his rookie year, he just continues to build on it. You saw what he was last year. You see what he is this year. This year has been really dominant. Watched him against the Seahawks, and I know we both had an amazing game against the Seahawks, 14 pressures. I think Hutchinson was kind of equally as good, or at least that unit of the defensive line for the Detroit Lions. So it is tough. Anytime you see a premier player in this league or a guy that's coming into his own get hurt early, we saw that with Nick Bosa after his rookie year, having to miss the entire season after week 2 is really just unfortunate for those guys.
NFC East, have at you says NFC East, not scary at all. NFC North is where the fear is for have at you. Is Washington the best team in the NFC East? Now they lost to the Baltimore Ravens, but they're just putting together games where it's like the Commanders are legit, and the Ravens are a good team. Both those teams 4-2 right now, but the Commanders, at least on the offensive side of the ball, can play a little bit. They might have I don't know if this is a full Houston Texans CJ Stroud situation, but I mean, I don't know how you can't believe in at least Jaden Daniels and where that thing might be going for the Commanders, even if they are a year away.
I mean, it sure does feel like it. And some of the throws I watched him make today, I think it was the last touchdown. It was kind of like this sideline throw, like got it underneath the defender. I mean, this dude, he's able to make magic with his legs. We've watched him, just throw the ball. He has the league leading completion percentage right now. So he's been very efficient. He's pushed the ball downfield a little. And we got to remember, I mean, this is 6 starts into his career. This is a guy that is only getting more and more comfortable. Now, just like any other young quarterback, teams will start giving film on him. What does he like to do? What does he not like to do? And maybe that film watching will really take place a little bit more in this offseason. But right now, I think teams are like, look, we got to really get a read on what this guy likes to do right now, because he's causing a lot of trouble for these coordinators. And I've talked about his, the guys that he has around him, not the most amazing weapons, right? Like Terry McLaurin, a really good receiver, which I had an argument with my brother Donald. He thinks that George Pickens is better than Terry McLaurin. I'm like, George Pickens better than Scary Terry? What are you talking about? But I think he had a little bit of that liquid courage drink or something going on there. But just, Austin Eckler, solid running back. He's, good pass catcher out of the backfield. Defense for them, Washington, not great. But man, Jaden Daniels, just the pressure that he's putting on these opposing defenses, he is doing a terrific job. I'm loving what I see. And a guy that I actually watched when he was in high school. Man, I went to the California State Championship game. My brother Donald, who I just referenced, played on the same high school team as Jaden Daniels. So I watched Jaden Daniels in the state championship up at Sac State when he was in high school. Very talented, young, skinny quarterback. He's still skinny and still making the same kind of plays.
Your brother Donald also says that Brock Purdy isn't any good, too.
Yeah,
so
we just have to dismiss a lot of his takes.
He has some interesting takes there, that guy. And your other brother, your real brother, is a Cowboys fan too. So I'm guessing that the Crocker family text threads are going off right now, or do you stay silent on this? Do you not need to say anything at a time like this?
Oh no, we attacked them. I told them that the Cowboys need to throw away those blue jerseys and never wear them again. As you guys know, Dallas Cowboys, they always wear their white uniforms. On a special occasion like Thanksgiving, they might wear a different uniform. Today they wore the blue at home. They never do that. And they may not need to do that ever again this season, because that was just a disastrous of a showing. And I want to say it was on like Jerry Jones' birthday. That was a great birthday present for Jerry Jones, an ass whooping. That was terrible.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can take aim at Monday Night Football with that $5 bet if you want to. The AFC East lead is up for grabs with the Bills and Jets facing off. Although Aaron Rodgers is at home, he is not favored. FanDuel has the Bills as 2.5-point favorites. Defense also expected to rule the day with the total set at 40.5. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Baltimore Ravens extend their winning streak to 4.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
Man, what an epic quarterback battle that we saw today between Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels. We have a stat here from Jonas Schaefer, the Baltimore Bear, and to kick it off, Lamar finished 20 for 26 for 323 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. His 12.4 yards per attempt were the most of the season and 5th most of his career. So Lamar Jackson slicing and dicing this Washington defense up, and I thought that both quarterbacks played outstanding football. So here today, we're obviously going to be diving into what transpired with Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels. We can talk about the defense bending but not breaking on the Baltimore side of things, because there were certainly some bends throughout this thing, but I was really impressed with Baltimore's ability for the most part, to not break. But man, crazy game. Absolutely crazy. Appreciate everybody who was here. Again, we do go live after every single Ravens game. And Joe saying, don't shave, Kevin, until the Ravens lose. I shaved yesterday and they won. So I don't know. The shaving has no correlation. I want to put that out there now. Jeremy, how about King Henry? The closer. I called him the Felix Batista of the Ravens for those who were Orioles fans in here as well. He is an absolute unit. But, I mean, man, so many different storylines, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. So let's start with Lamar, and then we'll kind of work our way down the offense, because there are a lot of guys that we have to talk about today. First of all, we read off Lamar's stats, but I thought one of the things that really impressed me with Lamar is, again, he's just so cool, calm, and collected back there. He never panics. Like he never does. And in this game, he took what the defense was giving him yet again, and that's something that I have said. If you've been listening to me for a while on this show, I have said that Lamar's done a great job of that this season. Only 6 different receivers hit today, but he was picking his spots so effectively. And when a guy broke open, Lamar already had that ball out or was in his motion, because he had that trust in his receivers. So when Zay Flowers broke out of a route, boom, that ball would be there. When Bateman turned back, boom, that ball would be there. Mark Andrews, man, he got involved in this game. We'll talk about him in a couple of minutes, but I thought Lamar was dotting up receivers and taking advantage, because the Commanders, they were trying to stay honest with everything. They were trying to stay honest in the box, which they had to do. They were trying to stay honest in the play action, which of course you have to do. But then that leaves one-on-one opportunities. And I think Tony Romo said this coming out of halftime, if you were watching on the broadcast, but he said you got to start shading the safety towards Zay. And we saw this. Peter King went to Ravens training camp last year, right, with Zay. And the thing that he said was, in order to slow down / stop Zay Flowers, you either have to hold him or you have to tackle him before the ball gets there. That's how good of a route runner he is. He was slicing and dicing whoever was there. But, man, I was so impressed with the way Lamar threw this ball around on the day. Baltimore did great on third down opportunities, 6 of 10. This is one of the ways the Ravens won the game today. 6 of 10 on third down. Commanders go 4 of 12. That's a huge swing, and the Commanders defense could not get off the field while the Ravens defense did. So you have to shout out what this team was able to do on third down. And it just felt like even when there was a penalty on this team, the Commanders secondary, I was honestly a little surprised, because look, the Commanders, their run defense actually did pretty decently against Derrick Henry and company. I mean, I say only, right? Only 4.8 yards per attempt, which for a Ravens offense, it's actually not bad. It was the Commanders' passing defense that was actually the one that was bad today. Benjamin St-Juste was getting cooked on every single turn. You know, Mike Sarin still had the interception that bounced off of Mark Andrews' hands, and I want to make it clear right now, not Lamar's fault. The ball was in a position where Mark can catch that football. Mark is a good enough player, we know that, to catch that ball. So both of Lamar's interceptions this season coming off of bounced off of Ravens receivers. But the Ravens were able to recover. And we'll talk about it in the second part of the show. The defense with their bend but don't break ability. Man, this team is back. Lamar Jackson improved to 22-1 as a starter against the NFC. If you're into the Johnny hype, Lamar Jackson is 4-0 since retweeting the Johnny tweet. So there's also that. But we're starting to see this offense come into its own, where I feel like with Todd Monken and this group, the play calling can be a little suspect at times, but overall, I think he's learning how to use Zay Flowers more each and every single week. He's figuring out how to use Derrick Henry more each and every single week, rotating in Derrick Henry and Justice Hill. All really awesome things for Todd Monken and this group. Both teams, again, the big difference here, I think, was in first downs and third downs in particular, because with the Ravens converting on more third downs, it kept the Washington defense on the field. And all the manpower that you have to accumulate to try to stop Lamar Jackson, to try to stop Derrick Henry. I mean, look, if you're trying to stop the Ravens, you have to understand that, yes, you're probably going to try to sell out to stop the run before you try to empty those boxes and try to play the pass. But guess what? Lamar is a heck of a thrower, and we all know that. And there were some comments this week in the national media, particularly by some former players, former Steelers, that look pretty silly now, don't they? We talked about that throughout the week. And look, it's not a slight on Jaden Daniels, man. Jaden Daniels played a heck of a football game too, and I have nothing but respect for Jaden Daniels. He's already a heck of a ball player and is going to be a heck of a ball player throughout his career. But as I kind of talked about, if you've been with me on Locked On Ravens, you listened to the shows this week, I had said putting these expectations and these comments on Jaden Daniels, these national media members and people who are making those comparisons are cashing checks or are writing checks that Jaden Daniels has to cash, right? When you're saying, oh, Jaden Daniels better than Lamar Jackson as a passer, and oh, we're talking about MVP. Those are checks that those guys are writing that Jaden Daniels has to cash. And look, Jaden Daniels had a heck of a game. Jaden Daniels made big-time throws, big-time decisions, but we're talking about a rookie in week 5 who is playing great football versus a 2-time MVP in year 7 who is playing great football. I think we can all appreciate that quarterback battle and say to Washington that, look, their time might be coming, but Baltimore's time is now. And for Washington, we're going to see the growth. But for the Ravens, they are trying to grow into the Super Bowl contender that we all know they can be. For Washington, I think they're a couple of years away, but I think that rebuild gets accelerated with Jaden Daniels at the helm. Let's talk about Zay a little bit more, because Lamar is obviously favoring Zay in this offense. I mean, as he should. Zay is running crisp routes, getting open, and making sure that he is in the right spot for Lamar to dot that football in. I mean, another game over. He was over 100 before halftime. I mean, it was unbelievable. He's breaking Ravens records, and I'll pull up the stats quickly. And again, I'm trying to also peruse through Twitter as we're doing this live. So any comments that John Harbaugh might have, that Lamar might have, I'm going to try to read those out as we can. And, actually, I'm seeing now John Harbaugh's news conference ended abruptly. Harbaugh went back to the locker room to make a call to check on his brother who was in the blue medical tent during the Chargers game. I did not realize that happened, man. So prayers up to Jim, and hopefully everything is okay for the Chargers there. But Zay, going back to Zay, said that the offense has a few things to improve upon, but believes they're one of the best offenses in the league. And I think they are too. When they play to their strengths, this offense is absolutely one of the best in the entire league, because with all you have to do to sell out to stop the run, Zay beat you one-on-one. I thought Rashad Bateman, shout out to Rashad Bateman, man. These last 2 games, I think, have been the 2 best games of his career, maybe not including that Miami game or maybe the Jets game or a couple of other very finite ones. But I think Rashad Bateman is playing the best football of his career right now. He is opening up the offense a little more. He is finding soft spots in the defense. And something that I've noticed, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but I certainly have, is this Ravens team, for the most part, is generally healthy this season. And specifically in terms of season-ending stuff, I don't think there was anything there. But these guys are getting down. Like, they're fighting for extra yards, but they're doing this like they're diving forward when they know that they're about to get crunched in on by 3 guys. They're diving forward for 3 extra yards, diving forward for 4 extra yards, doing 2 things simultaneously, keeping their body out of harm's way and fighting for extra yards. Because there'd be one thing if they were just catching the ball, giving up, and then that was it. But they're not doing that. I think it's a very smart thing. It might be a tactical change in kind of how the Ravens do things this year. But we see Rashad do it. We see Zay do it. We see Lamar do it. We've seen a lot of these guys do it. So, man, to see this offense humming the way that it is, and to see Mark Andrews, by the way, shout out to Mark coming back 3 for 66 and a score for Mark Andrews. Must have felt so good for him to kind of get that first touchdown of the year and make sure that he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. And maybe we'll start to see a more free Mark Andrews. We do have to criticize him for the interception. That was his fault, and that you can't drop balls like that, right? We're here to fairly criticize when it's due, and also to go and make sure that we give praise when it's due. And so Mark bounced back from that play. He did. Shout out to Mark for doing that, but that play can't happen. It cannot happen. Derrick Henry, 24 for 132 and 2 touchdowns. You know how we're kind of numb to Lamar Jackson performances. We're 6 games into the Derrick Henry Ravens experience, and I'm just like, 24 for 132 and 2 touchdowns for Derrick Henry. Okay, that's all right. Like, it's expected from him. Like, he's so good in this offense. It plays exactly to what he wants, and it fits his skill set in the way that he runs so perfectly that you're like, 24 for 132. All right, that's pretty solid. That's solid. But I think we're already being a little spoiled by Derrick Henry with the 87-yard run, some of these awesome touchdowns he's had so far this season. And we're just kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool. But man, no, Derrick wasn't the typical big day from Derrick Henry. Like, we're not talking right around 200 yards, but it was still a good day for Derrick Henry. Justice Hill and Zay Flowers combined for 2 carries for 4 yards. Really not a big Justice Hill game in this one. Lamar had 11 for 40. I thought Washington did a good job of defending the run, all things considered. But at the end of the day, the pass offense was what got this thing going. Lamar Jackson, again, goes for over 300 yards, and he is my front runner right now for MVP. I don't care who else is in there. Joe Burrow's not in it for me because of his record. Baker and that team looks awesome down in Tampa Bay. Huge primetime matchup coming up next week. I think that's going to be, again, we see Lamar enter all these battle for MVPs with a lot of quarterbacks. Maybe another one here, but Lamar is absolutely playing like an MVP. But guess what? Baker Mayfield and that Bucs team is going to be a heck of a challenge next week.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can take aim at Monday Night Football with that $5 bet if you want to. The AFC East lead is up for grabs with the Bills and Jets facing off. Although Aaron Rodgers is at home, he is not favored. FanDuel has the Bills as 2.5-point favorites. Defense also expected to rule the day with the total set at 40.5. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you canvas analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Tigers pull off the stunning upset in overtime. And
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers.
LSU gets it done. 29-26 in overtime. The Tigers celebrate 100 years of Tiger Stadium with what else? An iconic moment that Tiger Stadium and those who saw it will remember forever. I want to talk about what the win means for LSU and certainly for Ole Miss as well in the Southeastern Conference. We'll run through the game, some of the key standout players and moments as well. But I couldn't help but think about this. And if you'll allow me, I'm going to start by waxing a little poetic. Yes, listen, the win for LSU is massive. It moves LSU to 5-1 on the season. They're 2-0 in conference play. And that is super significant because even though you have a loss already, it's in the non-conference, and you just hung a second conference loss on Ole Miss, which all but eliminates them from SEC championship contention and puts their playoff hopes on life support. And they still have to play Georgia, but plenty to get there as well. But I want to take a moment and to begin here so we can actually step back and appreciate what we were all able to witness on Saturday night in Tiger Stadium. Listen, I know that Tiger Stadium is fallen victim to what a lot of places have. This arms race of stadium expansion had these 100,000 seat venues in a time where the home viewing experience is so good. And quite honestly, people aren't interested in fighting traffic and spending the money and taking the time to go watch LSU play Nichols or South Alabama or even some SEC opponents, or sit in 120-degree weather to watch them play UCLA. But what I've always said about Tiger Stadium was proven again on Saturday night, and that is Tiger Stadium remains, in my opinion, the greatest big game venue in this sport that we all love. And there's going to be times where it's not that. But I would argue that Tiger Stadium, when you're talking about big games and moments, is as good as it comes in the world. I don't know what it's like to watch Champions League soccer in Europe, or, I don't know, elite cricket matches in India. I don't know. I've never done that, but I can't imagine just the humanness of what we got to watch on Saturday night could be bested most anywhere in the world. And the reality is, what is gained in opportunities like that is immortality. Listen, sometimes we know the situation is ripe for a great moment. You have a ranked opponent coming in, the uneasiness, the anxiety of fear of losing, which was certainly there on Saturday when LSU played Ole Miss. Expectation, stakes. The loser of this game was going to have a second loss, and for all intents and purposes, their playoff hopes were gone. So a lot of those things come into play. All of that was true back in 2018 when LSU hosted Alabama, and LSU got shut out. It was not competitive. It was a dud. And that happens sometimes. So it doesn't always come to pass that when you have these moments, they live up to the expectation. But when they do, you have something so special. And when they do, you have something special that people will remember forever. On Friday, I had the good fortune to be a part of an LSU Alumni Association event at the Lod Cook Conference Center on campus. And they brought out these LSU legends, and it was a Football Friday panel and everything. But there was an LSU Legends panel, and Dr. Brad Davis was one of the panelists. And I couldn't help but think, if you don't know, of course, Dr. Brad Davis was the LSU player who caught the game-winning touchdown in 1972. Burt Jones to Brad Davis against Ole Miss the night the clock stopped. They wrote songs about it, the 1 Second Blues. It's part of LSU and Ole Miss lore. And Brad Davis wasn't an all-American caliber player. He played for LSU. He was a good player. I'm not saying that in any way, but the point is, 52 years after that play, this man is on LSU's campus at an alumni event telling stories from that night. That is immortality. That is not easily achieved. It's rare when it happens, but when it happens, you know it instantly. And my point is to say, in the same way that until the day he died, people reminisced with Dr. Billy Cannon about his Halloween night run. And Jacob Hester, who's a colleague of mine, can't go anywhere in this town around LSU without people bringing up Florida in 2007. That's when good players or even great players gain immortality. What you do in those moments on that stage in those games, Mason Taylor, for the rest of his life, will be reminded of the 2-point conversion against Alabama in 2022 in overtime for the rest of his life. Jaden Daniels, the Florida game in his Heisman season. Those moments don't come often. And we were treated to another one on Saturday night. 4th and 5. Less than a minute remaining in the ball game. Garrett Nussmeier to Aaron Anderson. That is a play we will talk about for as long as we live. for as long as the good Lord allows us to breathe air and live this beautiful, amazing life, we will talk about Garrett Nussmeier to Aaron Anderson on 4th and 5 to tie the ball game against Ole Miss with less than a minute to play. And we will talk about Kyron Lacey in overtime from Garrett Nussmeier on the first play from 25 yards out to win it, setting off a euphoric celebration, fans storming the field, which, you know, I'm not crazy about. We're LSU. The days of storming the field for beating Ole Miss are long gone, but have your fun. The point being, those moments we will talk about forever. Mason Taylor on that same drive, 19 yards on 3rd and 10. Earlier in the fourth quarter, a 4th down conversion on 4th and 10. Mason Taylor again came through. Those are the types of moments that we will remember forever. They're the moments that when I was a kid, we used to have this. My dad had a cassette. It was all these great LSU moments, and it was play calls, and you listen into the 1 Second Blues and J.C. Polite's call of Billy Cannon's run, and all those things. You start to create your own. Matt Malk to Skylar Green against Georgia in 2003. Burrow to Jefferson on 3rd and 17 against Texas. We all know the plays, the iconic moments. And on Saturday night, we added a few more to the vault that we'll be able to talk about for the rest of our lives. And that's a really awesome thing.